At 5 minutes on a cold November morning, Miss Eleanor Vale walked out of Ashbourne Hall, carrying nothing but a leather traveling case, a wool cloak, and a secret that could destroy one of England's oldest families. Behind her, the great house slept. Or at least Eleanor hoped it did. She paused at the bottom of the stone steps and looked back. Ashbourne Hall stood pale beneath the fading moon, its tall windows dark, its chimneys rising against a sky beginning to turn silver. For 22 years, Eleanor had known every corridor, every servant's passage, every creaking floorboard. She had believed it was her home. That morning, she understood that it had never truly been hers. A carriage waited beyond the yew hedge. Eleanor tightened her fingers around the small brass key hidden inside her glove. If Lord Ashbourne discovered what she had taken, he would come after her. If the Dowager Countess discovered it, she would lie. And if the truth inside that locked iron box ever reached London, the Ashbourne name would not survive it. Eleanor lifted her skirts and walked toward the carriage. She did not look back again. But before she reached the gate, a man's voice came through the darkness. "Miss Vale." She stopped. Lord Julian Ashbourne stood beside the old stable wall, coat thrown over his shoulders, his dark hair disordered from sleep. He had been watching her, and from the expression on his face, Eleanor knew something terrible. He had seen the key. For several seconds, neither spoke. The cold morning air hung between them. Julian had always possessed the sort of presence that made people conscious of themselves. At 29, he was tall, restrained, and remarkably difficult to deceive. As the heir to the Earl of Ashbourne, he had been trained from childhood to conceal emotion behind courtesy. But there was no courtesy in his face now, only suspicion. "What are you doing here?" he asked. Eleanor forced herself to breathe. "I am leaving." "At dawn?" "Yes." "Without telling anyone?" "Yes." His eyes moved to the carriage. "Where are you going?" "London." "Why?" Eleanor looked at him. "Because your family murdered a man. Because your father built his fortune upon a lie. Because your grandmother knows exactly what happened. Because the woman everyone believes died 22 years ago may still be alive. Instead," she said quietly, "I have business there." Julian stepped closer. "You have never had business in London that required you to flee Ashbourne Hall before sunrise." "I am not fleeing." "No? No. Then why are you trembling?" Eleanor glanced down. Her hand was shaking. She closed it. "I am cold." Julian almost smiled. It was the sort of smile that would have charmed her once. Perhaps that was why she looked away. He lowered his voice. "Eleanor, what have you done?" She raised her eyes. "Nothing that concerns you." The words hurt him. She could see it. That made leaving harder. For years, Julian had been her closest companion. They had ridden together as children, stolen apples from the kitchen garden, argued over books in the library, and once spent an entire summer convinced that they would marry each other when they were grown. Then adulthood had arrived. Julian became heir to the earldom. Eleanor became the daughter of his father's steward. The distance between them had become impossible to ignore. And 3 months earlier, Julian had announced his engagement to Lady Beatrice Harcourt. Eleanor had congratulated him. She had even smiled. Then she had discovered the letter that had changed everything. Julian's gaze fell once more to her gloved hand. "Give me the key." "No." His expression hardened. "Why?" "Because if I give it to you, I may never get another chance." "Another chance for what?" "To leave." A carriage wheel shifted on the gravel. Eleanor turned. Julian caught her wrist. She froze. He released her almost immediately. His voice softened. "Eleanor." She hated that tenderness more than anger. "Please," she whispered. "Do not make this harder." "Then tell me the truth." "I cannot." "Why?" "Because I do not know whether you are part of it." Julian stared at her. The words struck with the force of a blow. "Part of what?" Eleanor said nothing. From the house, somewhere in the distance, a bell began to ring. The servants were waking. Her time was gone. She stepped toward the carriage. Julian moved aside. But as she climbed inside, he said one final thing. "If you are carrying something that belongs to Ashbourne Hall, I will find it." Eleanor looked down at the leather case. "No, Julian." Her voice was barely audible. "I am carrying something that belongs to the truth." Then the carriage rolled away, and Lord Julian Ashbourne watched the woman he had secretly loved for years disappear into the morning mist. By 8 o'clock, Ashbourne Hall was in uproar. The Dowager Countess of Ashbourne sat rigidly in the breakfast room when the news reached her. "She has gone?" "Yes, Your Grace." The old woman slowly lowered her teacup. "Where?" "The coachman says London." "With what?" "Only one case." "One case?" "Yes, my lady." The dowager's fingers tightened around the porcelain. "Search her room." The servant hesitated. "At once." "Nothing?" "Nothing, my lady." The Dowager Countess looked toward the window. The mist had swallowed the road. "Then search the library." Julian entered before the servant could answer. "You already know what she took." His grandmother looked at him. "I know nothing. You ordered her room searched. She left without permission. She is 22 years old. She lives under this roof. That does not make her a prisoner." The Dowager Countess's expression remained cold. "Where is your father?" "In London." "And Lady Beatrice?" "Expected this afternoon." "Good." Julian stopped. "What does Beatrice have to do with Eleanor?" "Everything and nothing. I am tired of riddles." "Then stop asking questions whose answers you do not wish to hear." Julian stared at her. His grandmother had never frightened him as a child. She did now. "What is in that box?" he asked. The dowager's face changed. Only for an instant, but Julian saw it. He had inherited his father's title. Perhaps he had inherited his mother's eyes. But his ability to read a room came from his grandmother, and he knew fear when he saw it. "What box?" "The iron box in the West Library." Silence. Then the Dowager Countess stood. "Go to your room, Julian." "No, that was not a request. And I am not 12 years old." Her eyes flashed. "You have no understanding of what you are meddling with." "Then explain it." "I cannot." "Why?" "Because some truths are better buried." Julian's voice became quiet. "Is that what Eleanor discovered?" The Dowager Countess looked at him. And for the first time in Julian's life, she said nothing. That silence was answer enough. Eleanor reached London just after noon. She did not go to an inn. She did not visit a friend. Instead, she directed the driver toward a narrow house near Bedford Square. The brass plate beside the door bore a single name: Mr. Nathaniel Wren, solicitor. An elderly man opened the door himself. His expression changed when he saw her. "Miss Vale? You know me? I knew your mother." Eleanor's heart stopped. "My mother?" "No." Mr. Wren stepped aside. "Come in." The drawing room was modest but warm. He closed the curtains before speaking. "Did you bring it?" Eleanor placed the leather case on the table. Mr. Wren looked at it. "No." His voice was suddenly troubled. "Did you open the box?" "No." "Good. Why?" "Because whatever you find inside it will change what you believe about your family." Eleanor swallowed. "My family?" "The Ashbournes." She stared at him. "Then you knew." "I knew there was a secret." "What secret?" Mr. Wren sat. "You must understand something. 22 years ago, Lady Margaret Ashbourne disappeared." Eleanor's breath caught. "Julian's aunt?" "Yes. I was told she died. That is what the family announced." "Was it true?" "No." The room seemed to tilt. Eleanor sat opposite him. "What happened to her?" "I do not know." "But you knew her?" "Yes." "Then why did you never tell anyone?" "Because your mother begged me not to." "My mother?" Mr. Wren opened a drawer and removed a faded letter. He handed it to her. The handwriting was unmistakable. "Her mother's." Eleanor unfolded the page. She read, "If anything happens to me, tell Eleanor that the Ashbourne family did not merely conceal Margaret's disappearance. They caused it." Her fingers went cold. There was more. "The proof is in the iron box." Eleanor looked up. "What proof?" Mr. Wren's face was grim. "Evidence that Lord Ashbourne's father arranged for Margaret to be declared dead." "Why?" "Because she knew about the forged inheritance documents that made the Ashbournes richer." Eleanor stared. "Forgery?" "Years ago, the Ashbourne estate was nearly bankrupt. A disputed inheritance stood between the family and ruin. Documents were produced, proving that a distant relative had surrendered his claim. And he had not? No. Then the documents were forged. Yes. By whom?" Mr. Wren leaned forward. "That is what your mother spent years trying to discover." Eleanor's pulse quickened. "Was she killed?" The solicitor did not answer immediately. Finally he said, "I believe she was." A chill passed through her. "My mother died of fever." That is what the family said. Eleanor stood abruptly. "No." Mr. Wren looked at her sadly. "Miss Vale, no." She shook her head. "You are telling me my mother was murdered. I am telling you that she knew too much. And the box contains the final piece of evidence." Eleanor looked down. For the first time, she understood why the Dowager Countess had been terrified. She also understood why Julian had looked at her as though he had been betrayed. If the truth came out, Julian could lose everything. His title, his inheritance, his home, perhaps even his freedom. And Eleanor had loved him once. Perhaps she still did. But she could not carry a lie, simply because the man she loved had been born into it. That evening, London glittered. At Ashbourne House, Lady Beatrice Harcourt arrived in a carriage adorned with the Harcourt crest. She entered the drawing room smiling. "Julian," he barely acknowledged her. "You seem distracted." "I am. Your grandmother tells me Miss Vale has gone to London." Julian looked at her. "You knew?" "Of course." "How?" Beatrice smiled. "I have my sources." "Who?" "Does it matter?" "It does to me." Beatrice removed her gloves. "Eleanor has always been rather dramatic." Julian's expression hardened. "Do not speak of her that way." Beatrice looked surprised, then amused. "You defend her. I defend anyone who deserves it. Even a woman who steals from your family?" Julian went still. "What did she steal?" Beatrice smiled. There was something calculated in it. "Perhaps you should ask your grandmother." That night, Julian entered the West Library. He lit 3 lamps. The iron box stood behind a row of legal volumes. He found the hidden compartment. It was empty. His heart sank. Then he noticed something on the floor. A scrap of blue ribbon. Eleanor's ribbon. Julian picked it up. There was blood on the edge. He remembered the moment at dawn when she had turned away. She had been hurt, and he had let her leave. He closed his eyes. Then he heard footsteps. His grandmother entered. "Julian." He turned. "Where is my father?" "At Harcourt House." "Why?" She said nothing. Julian stepped toward her. "What happened to Lady Margaret?" The Dowager Countess's face became pale. "You must leave this room." "No." "Julian, was she murdered?" The old woman closed her eyes. For a long moment, she stood motionless. Then she whispered, "No." Julian exhaled. Relief. But the Dowager continued. "She was not murdered." He stared. "Then where is she?" "I do not know." 22 years and you do not know? "I know where she was last seen." "Where?" "At the old chapel." Julian's blood ran cold. "The chapel?" "Your grandfather confronted her there." "Why?" "Because she threatened to expose him." "And then?" "He ordered the carriage prepared." "For where?" The Dowager Countess looked at him. "For the coast." Julian understood. "She was sent away." "Yes." "Alive?" "Yes." "Then why did you tell everyone she died?" Because your grandfather said that if Margaret ever returned, the entire family would be ruined. Julian stared at her. And you agreed? I was 28 years old and pregnant with your father. You let your own daughter disappear. I believed I was protecting my family. No. His voice broke. You were protecting a name. The Dowager Countess flinched. Julian turned away. Then she spoke again. There is something else. He looked back. Margaret had a child. Silence. Who? The Dowager Countess's eyes filled with tears. I do not know. Julian stared at her. Then suddenly he remembered Eleanor's face. Her mother's letter. The blood on the ribbon. The box. His heart began to pound. No. The Dowager whispered. That is why I was afraid when Eleanor took it. Eleanor spent the following morning at Mr. Wren's office. She had barely slept. The iron box sat before her. She had brought it with her. For hours, she had stared at the lock. Finally, Mr. Wren placed a key beside it. Your mother gave me this 20 years ago. Eleanor inserted it. The lock opened. Inside were letters, a miniature portrait, a folded baptismal certificate, and a packet wrapped in oilcloth. Eleanor lifted the portrait first. The woman in it had dark hair and gray eyes. Eleanor knew those eyes. She had seen them every morning in the mirror. Lady Margaret. Mr. Wren nodded. Eleanor unfolded the baptismal certificate. Her hands began to tremble. The name written upon it was Margaret Eleanor Ashbourne. Father, Lord Thomas Ashbourne. Mother, Lady Margaret Ashbourne. Date of birth, 22 years ago. Eleanor could not breathe. My name. Mr. Wren looked away. Your mother was Lady Margaret. Eleanor stared at the document. But my mother was Anne Vale. Anne Vale was your nurse. Eleanor's knees weakened. She raised me. Because Lady Margaret was forced to surrender you. Why? Your grandfather discovered she had given birth. Eleanor covered her mouth. So I am. Julian's cousin. The words hung in the room. But there was more. Mr. Wren handed her the final letter. Read this. It was from Lady Margaret. My daughter must never be taken back to Ashbourne while your grandfather lives. They will call her a bastard if they cannot make her useful. Let her remain Eleanor Vale. Let her live without the burden of the Ashbourne name. If she ever learns the truth, give her this warning. The forged inheritance was not merely about money. Eleanor's eyes moved to the next line. The true heir is still alive. She looked up. The true heir? Mr. Wren nodded. Someone else was displaced. Who? I don't know. Then what is this? He pointed to the final packet. Eleanor opened it. Inside was a document bearing a seal. Mr. Wren read it. Then his face changed. What? He handed it to her. It was a confession, signed by Lord Thomas Ashbourne. The document admitted that the inheritance papers had been forged. But there was another name. Edmund Harcourt. Eleanor stared. Lady Beatrice's father. Mr. Wren nodded. The Harcourts and Ashbournes built their fortunes together. Then Beatrice knows. Perhaps. Eleanor looked toward the window. Suddenly, everything made sense. Beatrice's interest in Julian. The pressure for their marriage. The urgency. The family silence. If Julian married Beatrice, the two families would become permanently bound. And whatever secrets remained buried would stay buried, unless Eleanor exposed them. She folded the confession. Then I must return. Mr. Wren stood. No. If I stay here, they will find me. If you return, they may silence you. Eleanor looked at him. I have spent 22 years believing I was nobody. She placed the confession inside her case. I will not spend another day being afraid of a name. 3 days later, Ashbourne Hall prepared for the wedding. Julian was expected to marry Lady Beatrice Harcourt within the week. But Julian had not slept. He had searched through old family papers. He had questioned servants. He had ridden to the abandoned chapel. And there he found something. A name carved into the stone beneath a layer of moss. Margaret. Below it, "Forgive me." He touched the letters. His grandmother's confession had destroyed his certainty about his family. But one question remained. Where was Eleanor? Then a servant entered. "My lord." "What?" "A carriage has arrived." Julian turned. "Who?" The servant hesitated. "Miss Vale." Julian's heart stopped. Eleanor entered Ashbourne Hall at dusk. Every conversation died. Servants stared. Lady Beatrice stood halfway down the staircase. The Dowager Countess was behind her. Julian appeared in the doorway. For a moment, he simply looked at Eleanor. She had changed. Not physically. Something in her posture had changed. She no longer looked like a woman asking permission to belong. She looked like someone who knew exactly who she was. Julian walked toward her. "You came back." "Yes." "Why?" "Because I have something to say." Lady Beatrice descended the staircase. "How unfortunate." Eleanor looked at her. "Lady Beatrice, you have caused quite enough disturbance." "No." Eleanor's voice was calm. "I have caused nothing." She looked around the hall. "Your families did that long before I arrived." A murmur passed through the room. Julian's father, Lord Ashbourne, entered from the library. "What is the meaning of this?" Eleanor removed the packet from her case. "The truth." His face changed. The Dowager Countess whispered. "No." Eleanor held up the document. "This is your father's confession." Lord Ashbourne stepped forward. "Give me that." "No. You have no right." Eleanor smiled sadly. "Perhaps not." She looked at Julian. "But I have every right to know why my mother was erased." The room became silent. Julian's father stared at her. "What did you say?" Eleanor unfolded the baptismal certificate. "My name is not Eleanor Vale." She looked directly at him. "I am Eleanor Margaret Ashbourne." Lady Beatrice gasped. Julian did not move. The Dowager Countess began to cry. Lord Ashbourne whispered, "Impossible." "No." Eleanor held up the certificate. "Merely inconvenient." Lady Beatrice stepped forward. "You expect us to believe this?" "I expect you to read." She handed the document to Julian. He looked at it. His face drained of color. Then he looked at Eleanor. "You are my cousin." "Yes." The words hurt more than either had expected. Julian swallowed. "And you knew." "I learned 3 days ago." "Why did you leave?" "Because I was afraid." "Of me?" "Of what you would become if you chose your family over the truth." Julian's eyes filled with emotion. "I would never." Lady Beatrice interrupted. "This is absurd." She turned toward Lord Ashbourne. "Do something." But Eleanor had already removed the confession. "And this is signed by your father." Lady Beatrice looked at the page. Her face went white. Julian's father stepped backward. The signature could be forged. It was witnessed by Nathaniel Wren. Lord Ashbourne's expression collapsed. Then Lady Beatrice spoke. "Even if it is true, no one will believe her." Eleanor looked at her. "Perhaps." She reached into her case again. "But they will believe him." The door opened. An elderly woman entered. She wore a plain traveling cloak. Her hair was silver. Her face was thinner than the portrait. But Julian recognized the eyes. His grandmother covered her mouth. "Margaret." Eleanor turned. The woman looked at her. "My daughter." Everything stopped. Eleanor could not move. The woman walked toward her. "I have wanted to say those words for 22 years. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "You are alive." Margaret nodded. "I have always been alive." "Why did you leave me?" "Because if I had stayed, they would have taken you from me." Eleanor's voice broke. "You let me believe Anne was my mother." "I did." "Why?" "Because I believed a lie was safer than the truth." Eleanor stared at her. Then slowly, Margaret reached for her hand. "I was wrong." Eleanor began to cry. Not delicately. not quietly. 22 years of confusion and longing broke through her all at once. Margaret held her, and for the first time in her life, Eleanor was embraced by the woman who had given her life. The revelation did not end the scandal. It began it. Within 48 hours, the confession reached the magistrate. The forged inheritance documents were examined. The Harcourt connection was exposed. Edmund Harcourt, who had built his political influence upon the Ashbourne fortune, was forced to answer questions regarding the forged papers. Lady Beatrice's engagement to Julian was dissolved, but the greatest surprise came from Lord Ashbourne himself. He resigned his claim to the disputed lands. He could have fought. He could have denied. Instead, faced with the evidence, he admitted what his father had done. "I inherited a crime," he said, "and I mistook preserving it for preserving my family." Julian stood beside him. "You could have told the truth." His father looked at him. "I was afraid." Julian nodded. So was Eleanor. He turned away. For once, the Ashbourne name did not protect anyone. Truth did. Weeks passed. Ashbourne Hall changed. Not because the walls were different, because the people inside them were. Margaret remained at the estate. The Dowager Countess withdrew from society. Lord Ashbourne spent much of his time in London answering questions about the inheritance. And Eleanor? She no longer felt like a guest. She had been offered the Ashbourne name. She refused it. "I spent 22 years as Eleanor Vale," she told Julian. "I see no reason to become someone else, merely because the truth has finally caught up with me." Julian smiled. "Then Eleanor Vale it is." They stood in the library one winter afternoon, the same library where the iron box had once been hidden. Julian placed a letter on the desk. "What is that?" "A proposal." She raised an eyebrow. "From whom?" "Me." "To whom?" He looked at her. "You." She laughed softly. "You know we are cousins." "Yes." "Very close cousins." "Yes." "Which makes this impossible." Julian smiled. "I know." Eleanor shook her head. For the first time in months, she felt light. Then Julian continued, "But I did not come here to ask you to marry me." She looked at him. "Then why?" "Because I wanted you to know something." He stepped closer. "I loved you before I knew your name." Eleanor's expression softened. "And I loved you before I knew yours." He reached for her hand. Neither spoke. There was no need. Their love could not become what it once might have been. But perhaps that was not a tragedy. Some loves were not meant to end in marriage. Some were meant to survive the truth. In the spring, Eleanor left Ashbourne Hall once more. But this time she did not leave secretly. She walked down the front steps in daylight. Margaret stood beside her. Julian waited by the carriage. The estate stretched behind them, no longer a prison, no longer a mystery. Just a house, a place where terrible things had happened, and where, perhaps, something good might still grow. Eleanor looked back. For years, she had believed that leaving Ashbourne meant abandoning her past. Now she understood something different. She had not left to escape her family. She had left so that she could return as herself. Julian opened the carriage door. "London?" Eleanor smiled. "London. And afterward?" She looked at her mother. Then at the great house. Then at the road ahead. Wherever the truth leads. She climbed into the carriage. As the horses began to move, Margaret sat beside her. Eleanor took her mother's hand. Behind them, Ashbourne Hall disappeared slowly into the morning mist. But the secret that had once threatened to destroy the family was no longer a secret. It had become something else. A warning, a legacy, and proof that sometimes the greatest act of courage is not staying where you are loved, but leaving before the truth is buried with you. If you enjoy stories of Regency romance, secrets, scandal, and unexpected revelations, subscribe to Noble Tales, because there are always more secrets waiting behind the grandest doors. And as for Eleanor, She never regretted leaving Ashbourne Hall at dawn, because she had not taken the family secret with her to destroy them. She had taken it with her, so that, for the first time, the truth could finally come home.